Valentina was in a rush to get home. She had literally stepped out for just half an hour to buy medicine for her young son, Kawan. She stood in line for a long time, waiting for the pharmacist to finish assisting an elderly lady with her numerous prescriptions. Finally, Valentina was able to purchase the needed medicine and hurried back home. In addition to her 10-month-old son, Kawan, she had 2 other children. As a mother of 3, she received some financial assistance from the state. However, it was never enough. Her oldest son, Anthony Gabriel, who had just turned 9, was at home taking care of his younger siblings. The young boy showed remarkable courage and helped his mother as much as he could. He changed diapers, fed his baby brother, put him to sleep, and sang lullabies. On top of her domestic responsibilities, Valentina had to go to her shift at the local hospital, where she worked as a nurse. Her entire family depended on her. Her husband, Apollo, had died 3 months ago. He was hit by a car while crossing the street. Valentina was devastated. She was left alone with 3 children. But she pulled herself together and continued living for her children. She often had no choice but to leave the children with neighbors who were mostly alcoholics or dubious individuals, always asking for money to drink or complaining about their worthless lives. Valentina tried to talk to them, explaining that she also had many problems which these marginalized individuals hardly noticed as they sank deeper into their despair. These were the kinds of people Valentina had to live with in her neighborhood. Nonetheless, she adapted to them and taught her children to stay away from them. One day, Valentina didn't realize she was trying to cross the street in the wrong place. At one point, she almost met the same fate as her husband. But at the last moment, someone grabbed her coat sleeve. She turned around and saw an old woman in dirty and torn clothes. It was obvious she was homeless. She had appeared out of nowhere and literally pulled Valentina back onto the sidewalk at the last second. Just then, a car zoomed by at high speed. The driver didn't even think of slowing down, even though he knew he was in the city, not on a highway. Valentina, feeling guilty, lowered her head. The woman who saved her looked to be around 60 years old. The stranger adjusted her scarf and looked at Valentina with concern. "Why are you in such a hurry, dear? Are you in a rush to get to another world?" she asked as she approached. Startled and perhaps embarrassed by her reckless action, Valentina replied softly, "No, I was just rushing home to bring medicine to my son. My youngest son is sick, and I have 3 children in total. There's no one to take proper care of them. Only my oldest son helps, and he's only 9. The woman looked sympathetic and offered Valentina a seat on a nearby bench. Unlike most homeless people, she seemed different from all the rest, and Valentina noticed that she seemed to take care of herself. Her nails were clean and her teeth were intact. It seemed she had become homeless by accident. The woman expressed sympathy for Valentina's difficult family situation and offered to help. "Dear, maybe I can help you. Are you serious?" Valentina asked, raising her eyebrows. "Of course I am. I love children," she replied with a smile. "My name is Esther. I'm happy to meet you." "Nice to meet you too," Valentina responded. Then the old woman said, "Don't judge me by my poor clothes. It's a long story. I'll tell you one day. And don't be afraid of me. I won't steal anything from you or hurt your children." However, Valentina still had reasonable doubts about this woman, as she had never seen her before and didn't know what she was really about. Valentina was perplexed and didn't know if she should accept Esther's offer or refuse it. A stranger was standing in front of her, looking at her. Thoughts raced through her mind. What if she agreed? Could there be some kind of trap at the same time? Valentina was in a desperate situation. There was really no one else to take care of her children. Not even her friend could help. She had called her once and asked her to look after the children, but her friend said she had a date with a man. After weighing the pros and cons, Valentina agreed to Esther's proposal. She had no other choice. She needed to work that day. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Valentina's tidy apartment, which reflected the owner's dedication. Esther looked around and said, "It's a cozy and warm place." "We did our best," Valentina said. "Come in, let's have some tea." The children left the room when they heard the noise in the hallway. They immediately began asking, "Who are you?" "Hi, Grandma." Tears welled up in Esther's eyes. She took a handkerchief from her purse and dabbed her face. Seeing her distress, Valentina jumped in, saying to the children, "Yes, it's Grandma, but only for an hour." The children didn't quite grasp what an hour meant, but the most important thing was that they heard the word Grandma. They immediately smiled and began hugging the elderly woman. She almost cried from surprise again, but managed to hold back. Then, little Kawan took his medicine and felt a bit better. Valentina checked his temperature as a precaution, and it wasn't anything critical. After offering some chamomile tea, she began preparing for work and gave a few instructions. If Kawan's temperature rises again, give him syrup to reduce the fever. "You don't need to worry about anything," she said. "I'll handle everything necessary. All the medicines are in the cabinet." Valentina continued explaining and pointed to the glass cabinets. "If you want to eat something, there's soup and meat with pasta in the fridge. There's also formula on the kitchen table. Antonio and Gabriel know where everything is and will show you around. Everything will be fine." Esther tried to reassure her, saying, "I didn't come here for the food. You can go to work and not worry about anything." Valentina agreed, but in her thoughts she said, "How can I not worry? These are my children." However, Valentina's intuition told her there was no reason to worry, and she believed that Esther was incapable of causing harm. With this in mind, Valentina went to work with confidence, knowing everything would be fine at home. As she walked to the hospital, troubling thoughts about her difficult life after her husband's death lingered in her mind. Valentina found it hard to ask for help. Among her acquaintances, there was no one who could offer significant support. She often found herself in impossible situations and had to find solutions on her own. Valentina couldn't imagine what would happen if she gave up. The problems of life would likely unravel, and her children might be sent to an orphanage. However, Valentina managed to avoid this, largely thanks to her late husband, Apollo, who, despite being an orphan, always found a way out of any situation. She remembered how they urgently needed to pay for their eldest son's treatment. Valentina called everyone she knew, but couldn't gather the needed amount. Her husband then made a deal with a neighbor to help finish his summer house. In the end, Apollo earned the money for the medicine, going beyond himself for the sake of his son. Valentina remembered that. Now, when she needed to think about who would take care of the children, she put aside her principles and worries because her parents had become alcoholics long ago. There was no sense in expecting help from them. But even in the past, when they still had a decent life, her mother had immediately taught her, "You got married, which means you grew up. So go and don't bother us." How could she expect any help after that? With these heavy thoughts, Valentina hurried to work. But no matter how fast she walked, she still arrived late at the reception desk. Dr. Dominique greeted her with a cold look. "It's a shame. Where were you? If this happens again, I'll report you or cut your bonuses." Valentina almost cried in response. "I'm sorry, Dr. Dominique. It won't happen again," she said, nearly bowing at his feet. Valentina ran to her locker. Her colleague Luna, who had started working there a few months ago, was already changing clothes. Seeing Valentina out of breath, she smiled and asked, "Hi, Why are you breathing so heavily? Was someone chasing you or something? Valentina exhaled and said, I was running to work, hoping to get here on time, but ended up being late, unfortunately. Dr. Dominique was in the reception area and scolded me, threatening to fire me if I'm late again. That's life, said Luna sadly. Listen, I always forget to ask, who looks after the kids when you're at work? Usually Antonio and Gabriel, my eldest, Valentina replied, but recently a woman has been helping me. I found her by chance on the street. She seemed like a beggar, but she saved my life. I was about to cross the street in an improper place where we usually run, and I almost got hit by a car, Valentina said. What a gift from fate. And after that you invited her to your home? Yes, well, we agreed she would watch the kids tonight. Esther seemed to be an honest woman. I didn't see your documents, but it seems you're 76 years old. I don't believe people at that age are capable of anything bad. Naively, Lula shook her head negatively. Are you really leaving your children with just anyone? She has probably already robbed your apartment, and the girls are running around hungry and calling for their mother. No, she won't do that. Valentina shook her head. Okay, as you wish. Let's get to work. Otherwise, Dr. Dominique will really fire all of us. Initially, they had nothing to fear regarding being fired, since being a nursing assistant in the hospital required all their strength and nerves. They didn't earn much either. There were many people in the city willing to care for the sick, but there weren't many schools, so they had to work wherever they could, at least receive a regular salary. Luna began mopping the floors in the corridor. Valentina went to the rooms to turn bedridden patients and change the bedpans. She kept thinking about her children, her colleagues' doubts about Esther stuck in her mind like a splinter. Valentina started worrying that something might have really happened to them. At one point, she even suspected her friend might be right. Her intuition told her that her thoughts were irrational, and she was just getting carried away, creating more emotional problems without noticing someone's slippers abandoned near one of the beds. She almost tripped over them. She managed to keep her balance, but the bedpan fell loudly to the floor. The old woman sitting up in bed became upset and called for the doctor. After a few minutes, Dr. Dominique arrived and asked what had happened. Why the noise? Control your nursing assistant. She won't let me rest, the old woman complained. What happened? The doctor asked sternly. I simply didn't see someone's slippers and nearly fell. The bedpan slipped from my hands, causing the noise, she tried to explain. Okay, I'm giving you a warning. Continue working, said the doctor, wagging his finger, and left the room. The incident was over, but Valentina felt a bitter taste in her mouth. She regretted only trying to do her job correctly. Once again, Valentina realized that being a nursing assistant was a thankless job. As she left the room, she leaned against the wall and cried softly. Luna was mopping the floor when she saw her in that state. What happened? Who hurt you this time? Luna asked. I got caught in the crossfire, Valentina replied through her tears, and told her colleague what had happened in the room. They have no awareness. They could at least say thank you. Luna shook her head. On the other hand, at their age, that's pretty expected. And some of them aren't happy to have lived so long. It's really hard for them, and we simply can't understand, Valentina said. Their conversation ended when Dr. Dominique appeared and gave them a stern look. Luna continued mopping the floor, and Valentina resumed her rounds. The doctor sympathized with Valentina and even tried to court her, despite having a wife and children, promising to make her his lover. Valentina knew this and rejected his advances in every possible way. She had no intention of becoming that kind of woman or getting involved with an unstable, and more importantly, married man. It was difficult to expect anything good from him. He offered her love and gifts, promising to make her a queen. "I'll do everything for you," he said when they were alone. "No, thank you. I'd rather be alone than with you," she refused emphatically. Saying this only encouraged the man, but she couldn't even think about getting involved with a married man. After finishing her rounds, she joined Luna, and together they quickly cleaned all the rooms. Then they returned to work. "Dr. Dominique," Luna said, calling to the cafeteria, "if you're referring to his threats, I've already forgotten all about them." Valentina waved her hand. "Let's have some fresh ginger cookies. They haven't gone stale yet." As Valentina slowly went about her work, she didn't even notice the end of her shift approaching. She looked at the clock and murmured to herself, "Another day of work has passed." "Did you say something?" Dr. Dominique approached unexpectedly from behind her. "Yes, and I'm happy that all the patients are doing well," Valentina responded confidently and without hesitation. "Of course they're under my observation," the man said proudly. Valentina said nothing, just nodded. She barely had the strength not to laugh. It seemed like he was trying to prove to everyone that he was the best doctor. Waiting for the end of the shift, Valentina quickly changed her clothes and rushed home. "Why am I running?" she thought, worried about how the girls had spent the day. She hoped that if Anthony Gabriel hadn't called her, everything was fine. When she entered the apartment, she smelled pancakes. The girls immediately came out of their rooms. They were clean and tidy. It seemed the visitor had already fed and bathed them. Valentina was shocked to see this. "You're a real magician, Esther," Anthony Gabriel said proudly, holding little Kawano in his arms. "The woman is feeling better. She doesn't have a fever anymore." Valentina placed her hand on her head and was surprised to find she wasn't warm. "I made a herbal compress for her. The syrup helped, but traditional medicine is even better," the old woman replied. "I don't know what to say," Valentina said, confused. "I thought there would be chaos and mess." "Is that what you wanted to say?" Esther asked. "Well, not exactly, but something like that," Valentina admitted. "But now I look around and can't believe what I see." "Don't be surprised. I promised that everything would be fine," Esther said, bowing her head. "Sit at the table and try some. The girls have already eaten. But if you want more, there's enough for everyone." Valentina couldn't hold back her tears and embraced Esther. "You're my guardian angel." These words deeply touched Esther's soul. After they had calmed down, the women sat at the table to have tea and pancakes. They were so delicious that Valentina didn't even realize she had eaten 5 in a matter of minutes. After satisfying her hunger, she cautiously asked, "Forgive me for asking, but how did you end up in this situation?" "You know, Valentina, I really don't have much to tell," Esther replied, struggling to recall anything. "I woke up in some ravine without any documents or money. That was 6 months ago. There was a wound on my head. I could hardly get up. It was horrifying. And there was no one around." Valentina asked, her hands reaching out in compassion. "Why?" Esther shrugged. "Some street dwellers found me and took me to their shack. They gave me clothes because mine were in bad shape. Who knows how long I had to stay in that ravine? So it was either that or nothing. I don't even remember how it all happened." "Did you try going to the police?" Valentina continued to inquire. "Are you kidding?" Esther replied with a scoff. "I went there, explained my situation, and they didn't even record my statement. I didn't understand why, but they said they had stopped protecting people here. There was a local cop who told me I was disrupting the care of decent folks. Tell me, Valentina, am I not worthy of respect?" The old woman burst into tears and Valentina handed her a handkerchief. "No, that's not true. "You're a good person," she reassured Esther. "You just happened to encounter a heartless cop. Maybe that's why you didn't receive any help. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. You're just a victim of circumstances." And as for the police, they're always a rusty cog in the machine. Deep down, Valentina not only felt sympathy, but also indignation that no one had helped Esther. The woman had lost her memory and was adrift in the world. After some thought, Valentina suggested, "Stay with us. We have enough space, and the girls, as far as I understand, are happy to have you here." "Are you sure about that?" Esther asked cautiously. "I'm truly grateful to you, so I ask that you continue to take care of the girls," Valentina asserted firmly. "I work shifts as a hospital aide, and unfortunately my kids are often left alone." "Okay, I understand and agree, especially since I have nowhere else to go," Esther replied. Esther's face lit up with a happy smile, knowing that she could now live in humane conditions and wouldn't have to spend any more time searching for food. After agreeing on what to do and when, Valentina went back to work quietly at the hospital. Dr. Dominique still tried to approach her, but Valentina shut him down. "So, how's your homeless friend? Did she steal anything else from the apartments?" "Good Lord! Where do you get these thoughts?" Valentina responded, irritated. "We're getting along just fine. I've never met anyone who could help like she does." "Nothing surprising. There are people like that everywhere," Luna said, shrugging. "Well, name someone who helped you," Valentina suggested. Luna hesitated in her response. "See, it's unlikely that anyone would unless there's a direct benefit in it. Valentina, you know, friend, you're all right. I'm sorry for joking about that poor woman. Her name is Esther, and she's also like a mother to me," corrected Valentina. "Let's stop discussing that poor woman's life. Life has already knocked her down to the bottom of the pit. Let's not jest about her anymore." Okay, I'll be quiet. "Excellent, let's get to work," said Valentina, patting Luna on the shoulder, and they went to fulfill their tasks. That conversation was the last about Star in that manner. Luna no longer tried to involve herself with Star. On the contrary, she became interested in Star's well-being and what she was doing. It seemed that Valentina's colleague also showed sympathy for her, especially after Valentina mentioned that Star had lost her memory. Luna even passed things through Valentina for her stay. Luna's mother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind many clothes. Luna didn't have the heart to get rid of them, but this was an opportunity to put them to use. Esther thanked Luna and invited her to have tea and cake. The old woman knew how to cook deliciously, even though she couldn't remember where those skills came from. 3 weeks had passed since Esther showed up at Valentina's apartment. During that time, Esther had fully adapted to normal life. The girls had also gotten used to her, and strangely, they called her Grandma. They thought she had been away for some time and had returned. Besides, Valentina didn't think about dispelling their assumptions. They lived like a family. Meanwhile, Valentina couldn't forget Esther's memory loss. It was incredible that she had no family. Someone needed to be looking for that woman. However, Valentina didn't know who or where exactly, as she hoped to receive information soon. She reached out to volunteers with a request to search for Esther's relatives. She briefly recounted what had happened and provided photos from her phone when she took pictures of Esther. The volunteers promised to help. They began the search and kept in touch with Valentina. However, there wasn't much to share. In the places where homeless people used to go, no one knew Esther. They showed the photos to them, but the homeless people only repeated the same phrase. They knew nothing about her. It was surprising that Esther had spent so much time among them, and they didn't remember her. Or maybe they simply didn't want to get involved, afraid of being taken by the police, as many of them already had problems with the law. For example, the lack of documents didn't concern the homeless, but law enforcement officers might take a serious interest in that. And that's why the homeless didn't want to have contact at the same time. The search continued, and the volunteers promised to do their best. Meanwhile, Valentina herself tried to find her, using social media and other internet resources. Esther watched her actions and only lamented. "I don't think anything will come of this. Something would have come up if I had loving relatives. They would have appeared somehow during the searches. I should still try to find her if it matters." Alex continued, "Of course, I'm totally in favor of that, but I'm sorry to bother you." Ordered Valentina, "Don't disturb anyone. See how the kids walked away when they showed up. It's just a fairy tale, there's no reality to it." Valentina continued the search, which became known at work. While Luna supported, all the other officials joined in, and some even made gestures behind her back, saying, "You're going crazy, helping anyone. She's just an ordinary woman, struggling in life." Valentina tried to convince them. "You don't understand any of this, so don't judge her, and you won't be judged." Overall, almost everyone on the team except Luna believed Star was just trying to deceive her and trying to dissuade Valentina from continuing the search and sending Star to a shelter. But Valentina wasn't the type to give up in the face of difficulties. She believed she could find Star's relatives. At the same time, Dr. Dominique's advances led Valentina to a nervous breakdown. She didn't have time for love games, but he just wouldn't stop. So one day she responded to him rudely. "Why don't you just go away for good? I already have plenty of problems, and you're still bothering me. What's wrong with you? You have a wife, so go bother her." The doctor got angry, but at that moment the officials started gathering in the hallway, drawn by the noise. They decided to find out what was going on, almost surprised to witness a heated argument between the doctor and the assistant. "What are you doing here? Don't you have work to do?" Dr. Dominique shouted at them. "You should shout louder so the patients could hear you," Valentina retorted sarcastically. "You don't work here anymore," Dr. Dominique summarized. "You're fired. Pack your things and get out. Do whatever you want." The officials stood there stunned and began to argue among themselves. They didn't expect this attitude. Everyone expected the chief doctor to calm down and things to be resolved peacefully, but no. He went all in and fired Valentina. She received her pay and left the hospital without saying goodbye. She bid farewell to Luna, who was angry to discover what happened. She was in another section at the time. "If he did that, it's all right. I'll get over it," she said. "I'll find another job. Maybe I'll try some private clinics." In another job. "Maybe I'll try some private clinics. Don't worry. I won't disappear. I've been through worse. Life doesn't stop." "You're an optimist," said Luna, surprised. "Sometimes I surprise myself too," Valentina laughed. "I didn't even know how to keep living. It felt like the whole world had ended. Everything had turned upside down. You can't imagine what it's like to be alone with 3 kids in your arms. Well, everything's fine. The important thing is not to get discouraged." Valentina winked and left the hospital building. She was no longer connected to that place. Sure, it was a pity her work experience was interrupted. On the other hand, Valentina had a lot of problems that needed urgent attention. Recently, the volunteers reported they found a lead. They gave Valentina the address of a supposed relative, while Israel lived 100 kilometers away in a neighboring city. Valentina wondered why she hadn't been able to find her mother. Well, we don't know. It turned out they had met him. "We also collaborate with animal shelters," explained the volunteer. "So Israel went there to ask what to do with his cat. He missed the owner and wouldn't give peace to anyone." "I don't understand. What does the cat have to do with this?" Valentina asked. "The cat belonged to Esther," Gabriel continued, "from the shelter. Israel shared his concerns with one of the officials. That's how we found out he was Esther's son. Here's Israel's address. Go and share the good news with him. This will be a surprise. Valentina remembered. Thank you. I owe you one. We were actually interested in joining the search ourselves, the volunteer exclaimed. Valentina took a piece of paper with Esther's son's address. She hadn't told anyone yet. She needed to be certain he was truly her son. After learning about the coat and the cat, Valentina suspected Israel might have gotten rid of his mother on his own accord. If he could easily dispose of a cat, it wouldn't be difficult for him to do the same to a person. However, speculation wouldn't suffice. Valentina headed to the station to catch the first train to the neighboring city, and then she arrived at the address. It was a 3-story house that looked like a palace. Valentina had never seen such beauty before. Trembling as if it were cold outside, Valentina approached the door. He looked at Valentina and, suddenly, nodded as if asking who she was and what she wanted. For a few seconds, Valentina was lost, but then she took out some photos from her bag. The owner was shocked to see the photo. "Where did you get this? Where is my mother?" His hands were trembling. "Is she okay? Is she with me?" Valentina replied, "But I'm interested in knowing how Esther ended up in another city." "Let's talk inside." Israel invited her in. Valentina entered and was even more surprised. The beauty outside was just the tip of the iceberg. The real luxury was inside the house. There were antique furniture and paintings, marble tiles on the floor. "That's all that's left of my father," he said cautiously. "He was an antique dealer." "I see," Valentina nodded. "And here I thought it was you who had bought everything." "No, I'm just a regular middle-class businessman." He waved his hand. "My father did what he loved while I was in business." "All this is impressive, of course." Valentina changed the subject. "But I just can't understand how your mother disappeared." "This happened 6 months ago." Israel began his story. "I bought a ticket for the sea for my mother. She had wanted to leave for a long time, but after she left, she disappeared. The phone went silent, and I didn't know what to do." "Did you have to search for her?" Valentina asked. "Of course. I traveled all over the city, but to no avail," Israel said. "Strange. It's strange that with your resources you couldn't find your mother," Valentina said thoughtfully. Israel repeated, "I understand." Valentina then said, "Get ready. Let's go to where your mother is. Maybe she'll remember something." "Oh, what's wrong with her memory?" Israel asked in horror. "Maybe she has amnesia after the blow." "I don't know," Valentina said. "Oh my God. Let's go to her right now, but I need 1 more minute to call Olivia and let her know I'm leaving," Israel said, getting ready. "Olivia, who is she?" "If it's not a secret," Valentina asked. "Well, she's like my girlfriend," Israel replied uncertainly. "Why?" "Like your girlfriend?" Valentina asked. "Well, we still can't get married," Israel replied, frustrated. "First, my mother disappeared. Then other problems. So I decided there would be no marriage until my mother was found. You could have already gotten married, especially considering how much time has passed," Valentina says. "Let's stop talking about my girlfriend now. What's important to me right now is to see my mother," Israel replied. An hour later, they arrived in Valentina's hometown. As they approached her apartment, Valentina opened the door. A few seconds later, Esther appeared in the hallway. Seeing her, Israel shouted through the apartment, "Mom, are you alive?" "Valentina, is this my son?" Esther asked, confused, and began to cry. "Yes, it's him," Valentina replied. "It can't be, my dear son. I don't believe it," Esther continued to cry. "It's me, Mother. Israel, your own son." He extended his arms, trying to hug her. Esther didn't push him away and hugged him too. Valentina had hoped the encounter would be more modest, considering her guest's memory problems. However, everything happened differently. Esther broke into tears, recognizing her son, and at that moment she exclaimed loudly, "Exactly. Remember me, it's your girlfriend who's to blame." Israel asked in surprise, "I don't understand. In what sense?" "Wait, I don't feel well." Esther waved her hands and began to lean on Israel and Valentina after catching her breath. Esther looked at everyone with teary eyes and said, "It was a mistake, son, to get involved with her." She knew something bad was going to happen. The stress of meeting her son affected Esther, and slowly she began to recall the events of that unhappy day. Did Esther really go to the sea? She wanted to relax in the warm areas and soak up the sudden sun. Israel bought a ticket and booked a hotel just a few minutes' walk from the sea. He thought he was giving his mother a gift. However, the cause of all their troubles was the relentless girlfriend. It was she who instigated her acquaintances to get rid of Esther. That's why they not only hit them over the head from behind, but also mentioned Olivia. Leave Olivia alone. Don't interfere in her and Israel's life, Esther said. Are you serious? Asked Israel, horrified. Yes, strange as it may seem, it was your Olivia who wanted to finish me off. The old woman continued to talk about how she was against their relationship. Esther saw through Olivia, and that's why she insisted they sign a prenuptial agreement. Israel was skeptical at the time about the usefulness of such formalities, but his mother convinced him it would be better. And in the end, he agreed. But the girlfriend categorically refused. And then her mother went to the sea and disappeared. I knew your relationship wouldn't end well, her mother concluded. Israel cried. I was blind, like a kitten. I didn't perceive anything around me. Later, Israel called his friends and asked them to extract information from his ex-girlfriend about what she had tried against his mother. Under pressure, she confessed everything and handed over her accomplices. They were then arrested. And during the investigation, they confessed that everything was planned by Olivia. It was she who convinced them to keep an eye on Esther at the nearest station. When Esther went down to the station to get some fresh air at night, they chose the right moment, but someone scared them off. In general, they left Esther in a bind, took her money and documents, and left. So they covered their tracks, so that if something happened, the case would be investigated in another city. However, they informed Olivia that the job was done and received money from her. Israel was shocked when he found out everything. Esther fully regained her memory and knew that her son had been looking for her all this time. So, half a year passed. Israel started a relationship with Valentina, especially since his mother approved. And then he asked her to marry him. The woman was over the moon with happiness. She started crying and said, with sadness and joy until the end of our days, I accept to be your wife. Until the doves took flight and circled above them to the sound of her voice. It was a good sign indicating that two loving hearts had found each other. Esther became the true grandmother of the girls. She approached Valentina, and the children began to prepare to move into Israel's house. But in her hometown, Valentina had a debt to pay. Israel was surprised when Valentina asked him to take her to the hospital where she had been dismissed. Valentina easily found Dr. Dominique, who was making his rounds among the patients. Without hesitation, she began to say everything she thought about him and what he deserved. His wife was in the hospital this time. The poor Dr. Dominique sought a place to hide from his enraged wife, but still had to endure many criticisms from her. After all this discussion, he lost all will to flirt with other people. Finally, all matters were resolved and Valentina and her children left the city for a new life.